Time for the next thing after the break. This is a lecture performance about object species. You hear me in the back? Everyone over there, you hear me? You hear me? Okay, good. There you see a man with a brush drawing something. The question is, who is drawing whom? The man making the drawing, or the drawing making the man? We usually apply the word species to things we call living beings, and we talk about the evolution of species, how humans evolved over a lineage of different apes that came from ancestor mammals, etc. And the story of life's evolution is traced all the way back to the single cells. Pay notion to that nothing outside living beings is considered species. I want to talk about a new idea, object species, because it has something to do with how I perceive art. Art is an example of an object species. But so are countless other dead things, such as bags, vehicles, buildings, and computers. Object species is put together from two words, object and species. An object is a material thing that can be seen and touched. A species is often defined as the largest group of organisms in which any two individuals of the appropriate sexes or mating types can produce a fertile offspring, typically by sexual reproduction. An example of species are fungi, mammals, reptiles, plants, and insects. So how can an object be a species? They are dead. They cannot multiply on their own. They have no DNA. They cannot evolve as they have no brain. Objects, they are just things we make. They serve us. They are just utensils that we use to do our masterpieces. We do with them what we want. They are there when we want, how we want. They are just objects. But as we are moving towards more equality, equality of the sexes, gender acceptance, facing racism, protecting nature, giving animals rights, insects rights, plants rights, we can go deeper, deeper into the unknown. Maybe we could try to erase the line between the dead and living. And talk about structures instead of dividing the world into living beings and inanimate things. Third, all structures compose and decompose under the right circumstances. All structures are inseparable from their surroundings. They need the environment to form and to exist. They are dependent on sources outside of themselves and have relationships with other structures. Nothing stays in the same shape forever. The world truly is a one giant shape shifter. That's the core nature of just about everything. In the lecture performance From Magma to Mankind, I explained the idea that life didn't start with the single cells. There are many chapters of evolution before the first single cell came about. The story of life started further back. Everything is traceable, for example, to the glowing hot lava or magma. And magma was gas before, and behind that is energy, and the story of evolution goes deep into the core of things. Everything on this planet, all structures, come from that source. Humans are complex structures, but nevertheless just structures, like everything else that evolved from magma. Is there life on Mars? Everyone is still asking, while sending very expensive equipment to space instead of saving planet Earth. I say yes, every single rock or grain of sand on Mars is alive. If you look inside them, they're all functioning. The rocks and the grains of sands are structures with molecules moving around inside them. They're composing and decomposing, developing, transforming and building new formations. It happens slow, but it's still happening. Rocks, plants, animals are first and foremost structures that compose and decompose under the right circumstances. We just have to widen our horizon of what is alive and what is not. Erase the line between dead and living structures. We need to stop talking about dead or alive and see that it's just structures. Mars has structures that are growing, although they might not be what we were looking for. And maybe we have to examine what we are looking for instead of searching based on old ideas. The whole universe is obviously always active. Nature is not just something green we find on planet Earth. The rocks on Mars are part of our nature, and they are just as much alive as the rocks, the plants, and the humans on planet Earth. Snowflakes are object species that form under certain circumstances in the clouds. They fall on the ground and eventually melt and disappear. People who are born under the right circumstances, they live alive until they die and decompose, just like snowflakes. Humans and snowflakes are structures. One is more complex and walks and talks. The other one looks fragile and silent. Nevertheless, snowflakes can be an enormous force, like during Ice Age when glaciers shape the surface of Earth and limit the area creatures can live on. Both are structures and species. Animals are species, are Homo sapiens, and the object species, snowflakes. Both share the same basic nature. We know how species reproduce. How do object species reproduce? A vase cannot have babies, or can it? Object species reproduce differently than animal or plant species. The relationship between trees and bees is in many ways similar to the relationship between object species and humans. The bee sucks honey from a flower on a tree, more or less. Pollen sticks to its feet, and when it flies to another flower on a different tree of the same kind, it fertilizes it. The tree needs help with reproduction, and so do humans. And then I'm not talking about artificial insemination. First, let's see how object species get help with reproducing themselves. Here's a chair. A human sits down on the chair and takes a rest from work. She likes it and needs to sit down many times a day. She cannot live without the chair. After a few years, the chair has started decomposing, so the human decides to make a new chair. This is a symbiotic relationship, a win-win. The human gets rest and the chair gets help with reproduction. Just like the bee got food and the tree got help to reproduce. Humans have not been considered needing help when reproducing. We learn in school that a man and a woman have to have sex if they want to have a child. But from the perspective of this lecture performance, it might be a bit limited description. There is so much needed so that this can happen successfully and that a child is made. Yes, the circumstances for a new human to be made are very complex. Let's name a few helping elements and structures that are needed. If there is no air to breathe, it cannot happen, as both individuals would die from lack of oxygen in the middle of it. So, air is a participating structure. No air, no new baby. Woman plus man plus air equals baby. If their bodies had no water, they would dry out and be dead before they could reproduce. Woman plus man plus air plus water equals baby. If all the viruses and microbes, fungi and whatnot would be wiped out, there would be no new children. Air, water and microbes help humans to reproduce, just like humans help chairs to reproduce. And I could go on and on. Just like the chair needs a human to be reproduced, a human needs so many helpers to reproduce as well. In other words, humans cannot reproduce on their own. A child does not happen because two persons have sex. It happens under a very complex situation or circumstances that happen to be present on Earth. So the idea of reproduction happening solely between two individuals within the same species is a somewhat an unclear idea. To talk about art as species, let's talk a little bit about dogs. What do art, dogs, and humans have in common? More than it looks at first. It was thought until very recently that dogs were wild until about 12,000 years ago, but DNA analysis published in 1997 suggests a date about 130,000 years ago from the transformation of wolves to dogs. This means that wolves began to adapt to human society long before humans settled down and began practicing agriculture. The wolf got food, fended off enemies, helped herding animals, and became slowly man's best friend. In the 18th and the 19th centuries, Homo sapiens started to shape dogs into more exaggerated breeds. Golden Retriever, Poodle, Schäfer, Bulldog, and endless others. All of them are domesticated descendants of the grey wolf. In my interview with Jane Bennett, the author of Vibrant Matter, Political Ecology of Things, I asked her if we can say that art is its own species which might have coexisted with humankind just like the dog was bred from the wolf. She said, I like the idea of art as a species, or even better, art as a vital force that joins up with differently earthly bodies at different times and places. So art would have an existence that retains a moment of independence from the artist. Art as a force that sometimes joins up with the creative genius, or say a Da Vinci, but at other times with the striped bodies of a zebras, or the graceful curve of a plant stem that reaches for the sun, or the striated layers of granite. You can read more of that in the interview with Jane Bennett in this book, Stones, according to Egill Sæbjörnsson, published 2012 on Revolver Verlag. The second wave of domestication of the dog happened around 15,000 years ago, prior to the agricultural revolution. Until then, humans had been hunter-gatherers, as we all know. That meant that they did not stay in one place, but wandered from one area to another in quest for food. The wolf, on the other hand, was a sedentary species, staying in one place, guarding its area. Shortly after the second waves of dog domestication, humans started behaving like them. And then what happened? The agricultural revolution started. And that led to the formation of the first cities, such as Katahuyuk in Turkey 10,000 years ago. Suddenly, society completely changed. States and armies were formed. Merchandism escalated. The grand religions came about as a tool to try to keep the larger groups of people together. Cities are object species. They evolve and reproduce with the help of humans. Religions are object species too. They evolve and reproduce with the help of humans. Man domesticated thought, then religion, then art, then the dog, then became modern human. And somehow, mysteriously, the world created us into what we are. When humans started using their hands, a new chapter started. And humans went on a new path. With a triangular function between the mind, the sophisticated hands, and the objects in nature. Art invaded our world. If you drop a stick on the ground, it leaves a mark. If you drag the stick after the ground, it leaves a mark, a line. Now, playing with that is what we call drawing. Smearing pigments onto the surface of a cave must have been fun and interesting, and slightly magical. The drawings stayed on the wall talking to other people that came and saw them. The drawings were like a new being standing between the one that made them and the other ones that saw them. And as many people saw them, they took on even more transcendental meaning. When you read art history, you are following the evolution of art as a species. And how art has new breeds, like all the dog breeds in the 19th century. What followed were sculptures, more drawings, housings, and more art-related objects, such as installations, performance, video art, computer art, digital art, NFTs. Art has evolved with us and changed us enormously. Art is an object species that has walked with us, given us joy, inspiration, spiritual revelation, power, and all kinds of things we might not have realized without it. We domesticated art, and the art domesticated us. Is the painter painting the painting, or is the painting painting the painter? In the book Art Can Heal, about the life and work of the Icelandic pioneer in art therapy, Sigríður Björnsdóttir, she says that she believes art is an instinct power within every individual. And by drawing thoughts and emotions, exploring our inner worlds by the means of art materials, colors, pencils and paper, even mud, grass and sticks, and express ourselves with them through the picture, can have a very positive effects on our mental well-being, and that we can basically heal ourselves. That describes the force as art as entity. Art Can Heal was written by my mother, Augusta Oddsdóttir, and will soon be published on Valda König Bücherverlag in Germany. When I look at paintings in museums, I sometimes feel like I see a creature behind them that stares back at me, infinitely deep and large, that remains silent and then speaks to me at the same time. I feel a presence of this large meta-level creature standing behind the works, like as if standing behind a spyglass mirror, staring at me gently, radiating something that humans on their own can't radiate to each other. Object species are not only bound to physical structures. Dreams, concepts, conversations, music, virtuality, or digital space are object species too. In my work about virtuality as object species, commissioned by curator Nadim Zaman for Kunstwerke Berlin digital platform in collaboration with the Living Art Museum in Reykjavik, I try to list out the history and evolution of virtuality as it existed before computers, and how virtuality or even virtual reality is nothing new in its essence. Although computers, telephones, servers, and all the physical things that form the internet are necessary to host homepages, have Zoom meetings, play games like Second Life, Fortnite, or Minecraft, virtual reality or virtuality has long existed, such as when someone writes a book and another one reads it. Although the printed letters on the pages themselves and the printing industry, bookstores, bookshelves, are the physical entities needed to carry literature as object species around the world, virtuality is an object species with ancestors older than the internet or computers. Object species are so many. Art is one, virtuality is one. Chairs are one, vases, buildings, books, roads, cars, computers. And they all evolve and reproduce, just like the living species. That was it. Thank you.